All right, we are looking at lesson 3, part A of statistics and some notes. And so, previous lesson was talking about the dot plots, representation of data, histograms versus bar graphs. So, if you have any question on that, please refer to the previous video. This video is going to measure spread or variation. And so we're going to get an understanding of what that actually means, and then we're going to get some foundational skills that we're going to be able to build off of to find some other aspects of variation and some actual quantitative values to determine whether things are outliers or why they be skewed or what that means. Okay, so we're kind of building the foundation in this lesson and video. All right, first one. So variation, as you might suspect the word might mean, is variety or change or difference. And so we're measuring what that is in a certain amount of data. And so the range specifically, okay, is going to take the maximum value minus the minimum value. So if you have a whole set of data, you put it in order, get the smallest value and the largest value, take the largest, subtract the smallest. That is what we know as range. Okay, we have something called quartiles, okay, which are a common measure of position. So basically, they're almost like flag posts in certain areas of the data. Say, hey, it's about the 25th percentile, about the 50th, about the 75th percentile. And as you might suspect with the word quartiles, sound like quarters, so it's fourths. It helps us divide up that data into fourths, essentially. So the lower quartile, okay, is known as Q quartile 1. Okay, and that by definition is the median or the middle point of the lower half of the data. So if I cut it in half exactly, okay, the lower half is the bottom half, and I cut that in half, that half point is quartile 1 or Q1. The second quartile, okay, or Q2, okay, is always the median. So the middle point of your whole data set. All right, so that's the second quartile or the median. Now the upper quartile is Q3, okay, and that's the median of the upper half of the data. So that'd be about the 75th percentile, and then the lower would be about the 25th percentile. All right, so far so good. We got the interquartile range, okay, which is known as IQR. Okay, and describes the spread in the middle half of the data, which is found by using Q3 minus Q1. So IQR equals, okay, if I had to put it into a quick equation, IQR equals Q3 value minus Q1 value. That is your IQR. Okay, one important bit of detail is that we got to make sure when we have a set of data that we always list data in order. Okay, if we're doing this by hand, that is an absolute must. If you're doing it on a calculator, the order that you put it in doesn't necessarily matter because it will calculate these things for you. But for now, let's use this set of data. All right. So we look at this number line from 25 value to 54. If I needed to figure out the range, right, I would take 54, the max, minus 25, and I would end up with 29. So my range would be 29. All right, so if I just labeled this real fast, this is my lowest part, this is my minimum. Okay, and 54 is the top point, and that is my maximum. Okay. Now, if I look for the middle value, I see that I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, that is an odd number, so I can go and find the middle value itself listed, and that is going to be my median. And so I'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is my median, okay, which is also known as Q2. Okay. And so then I look at the data above the median. I have 5 values there from 44 to 54. The median is the midpoint of the upper half of the data. So 49 would be my upper quartile, also known as Q3. I do the exact same thing below, and I would see that 36 is my lower quartile, and that is my Q1. Okay. All All right, so we can see that from this data point to this data point, that's basically 25%. Okay, and then to here, that's 25 more percent, right? Get the idea of quarters, 25%, and then 25% for all of the data. Okay, and so just a point that I want to make very crystal clear. Let's use green here. Okay, this right here to here, that is my IQR. Okay, my inside quartile range. So that's the part between my Q3 and my Q1. So this is my interquartile range. Okay, now, if I get an exact number for it, I would just subtract 49 minus 36, and that would give me my IQR. All right, which we'll do here in a second. Okay, so the quartiles along the minimum and maximum values are called, all of these values together are called the 5-number summary. Okay, so these are 5 values that give us really good foundational information about our data set, and we can use it to figure some things out. One of those being the IQR, which I'll calculate right here. All right, so my IQR equals Q3 minus Q1. And that value is 49 minus 36. So my IQR is 13. That's my interquartile range. All right. And finding these points, the minimum, the maximum, Q1, Q2, and Q3, those are known as my 5-number summary. All right, so also note that when calculating quartiles, if the number of data points values is odd, the median is not included in either half the data when calculating Q1 to Q3. All right, so what that is saying is just like up here, okay, if I have an odd number of data points, which I do, I have 11, okay, then I'm not including that median when I'm finding the Q1 and Q3 value, which I showed you up here. 41 is the median. And those 5 values, I was able to find the middle value, and that gave me Q3. I did not count the median within that, that 5 or 6. And the same thing down here below. I got 5 values. The middle value is then my Q1. All right, so that's all that means. Now, we have a number that's greatly higher or greatly lower than this value set. We call that an outlier. Not a Q. Outlier. It is something that is very different than most of the rest of the data. Okay, it's very large or very small. Now, the challenge that we're going to find is, well, how do I know if it truly is an outlier? Is it just my opinion? That looks really high or that looks really low, so I'm going to call that an outlier. We go beyond that. We want to be able to have definitive lines that says, all right, if this value is lower than this or higher than this, then we can all agree that that is an outlier. But if it's not, then we're going to determine that it is not an outlier. We will figure out how to calculate that in a moment. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of examples and see if we can figure these things out here. All right, so we have a fundraiser at school cafeteria, okay, and so they track the attendance over the last 9 years. Okay, so the question is to find the minimum, lower quartile, median, upper quartile, and maximum, your 5-number summary. So first step always is to list the data values from least to greatest, which they have done for us, thankfully. All right, so I can identify the lowest value there, 38. 38 people, okay, is my minimum. Okay, if it goes down here and answers the maximum, I could do that quickly and say 96 people is my maximum value. But all right, let's take a look at the other values, Q1, median, and Q2, or Q3 rather. All right, so I look and see that I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 data points, which is nice. And so I look to the middle, this 48, that is going to be my median. Okay, so I got 48 people as my median. Okay, that's my middle value, my median. All right, here's my max. Here's my min. All right, now we got to figure out the upper and lower quartile. So if I look and see now, if I'm not including the median, that's what that point above said. Now I just have 4 values here. Now there is no middle number for me to determine what the median is, or Q3. So if I'm looking at this, I need to take the two middle values, which are 55 and 62. Okay, for the, oh, that's why there's a typo here. I always forget that. This is supposed to be upper, and that's supposed to be lower. Okay, so I'm looking at this value. I see the two middle values of 42 and 45. So just like we did in the first video talking about mean, median, and mode, if we have a even number, I got to take the two values in the middle, add them, divided by 2, so basically find the average of those. And I find that Q1 is going to be 43.5 people. I do the same thing with the upper. But again, those two middle values are 55 and 62. So I got 55 and 62. Divide that by 2, and I end up with 58.5 people. All right, so I've calculated my 5-number summary: minimum, maximum, Q1, median, Q2, or Q3 rather. All right, and so I'm able to do that from a data point. Okay, but let's see if we can do this with a calculator, because with 9 values, I could reasonably do this on my own. But with a bunch of values, now we're going to have a problem. So we're going to take a look at that here in a second. Let's take a moment and figure out how to determine if there's an outlier or not. Okay. Now we've calculated aspects of this before, and so now we're going to really determine how to do that. So let's take a look. Find the outlier of the data set. Great. To find it, I got to determine the interquartile range and multiply that value by 1.5. All right, so I can look and see that in this case, my interquartile range, take my Q3, okay, which is going to be 58.5. I'm going to subtract that from my Q1, which is 43.5. And do that math, I end up with 15. And then I got to multiply that value by 1.5. Again, 15 is the IQR. 15 times 1.5 is not. I'm using the IQR and multiplying that by 1.5, something that easily gets confused and lost in the shuffle over time. All right, so this value is 22.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking the IQR, and then I'm going to, and I'm going to use this up here, if I got that green part, what I'm going to do is take those boundaries, Q3 and Q1, and I'm going to take what I just calculated and expand them on both ends. So I'm going to add to the upper quartile range. I'm going to subtract from the lower quartile range. I'm just pushing those boundaries a little further to account for some values that might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but we're going to set an exact boundary that then I can determine, well, if something's outside of that, well, that's definitely an outlier. And that's what we're trying to do down here. So we can see that value, okay, 22.5, okay, I'm going to use right there. And this is my Q1 value. So I do Q1 minus that, and I get 21. So my lowest boundary will now be 21. Okay. And then for the upper boundary, okay, I take Q3 and I add the value here. So notice Q1, I subtract it. In Q3, I add it. Okay, so make sure we keep that straight. So now I have a boundary. So just to kind of have a visual of this, all right, I'll do this kind of quick. This is Q1, Q3. Okay, and so right here, this was my initial IQR. And so this value was 43.5. This was 58.5. But now I'm going to push, okay, that value a little bit further. So now my new value here is 81. And my new value, my lower boundary, is going to be 21. So now I'm looking, okay, this is kind of my new outlier boundary. So I look at all the data points and determine if anything is above 81, that's an outlier. If anything is below 27, that's an outlier. But if anything is between 21 and 81, we are not considering that an outlier, even if it's 21 or 81. So I look through the data points. There is no data point below 21. So there'll be no lower outlier. But above 81, we do have a value of 96. And so therefore, 96 would be an upper outlier. So now we all can look at the same set of data and say, this is an outlier, or that is an outlier, or that is not an outlier. We all have the same boundaries. That's why we do this calculation. This is important. You will be doing this consistently. Okay. So let's take another look at how I can use the calculator to help me. All right. So, now that we kind of understand what it is, we can expedite this process a little bit more by using our calculator. So let me walk you through that. All right. So if you have your TI-84 plus CE, all right, you start with a blank sheet here. So what am I going to do? All right. So at the bottom here, you see the key press history. So the buttons that I pressed, and then whatever button I pressed recently will show up red. So you can see that on the screen. You can see the buttons I'm pressing at the bottom as well. All right, so I'm going to start by pressing stat. Okay, and then I'm going to press enter, okay, which I got the one highlighted. And I'm going to have lists here. Okay, these are previous ones that I've done. And so I'm going to clear some of these out and show you. Okay, so we're going to enter in all the data points. So we got 42, then you press enter. That's the first data point. 38, press enter. 50, press enter. And I encourage you to have your calculator out and do this along with me so you can get that kind of muscle memory of what you have to press. Because we will be using this and you will need it on a quiz and test. All right, so I have put all those points in. Fantastic. All right, notice I have it under L4, that's list 4. You might have it under L1. I'll show you how to switch that when we do the calculations. All right, so I put all the data points in. I go back to stat, but now I'm going to go to the right, arrow over to one VAR, variable statistics, stats. Highlight that, press enter. Okay, now this is where I have to designate what list. It's not necessarily going to pull the one up that you want. So if you need to change the list, let's say it was like this, but I know I just put those values into L4 to list 4. I need to change it. So you see the blue values above the keys on your calculator. That means that I need to press the second button first, which is the same color, blue, to activate any of those specific functions on my calculator. So second, and I want L4 because you see that in blue, and it will change it to L4. But in this case, I got to delete it all to get my L4. Do not worry about frequency list, and then scroll down to calculate and press enter. So now I can look through it. I see a bunch of different things. Some of this we'll get to in a different video, but for now, just scroll down to the bottom and we could look at our values. You see the min X, Q1, median, Q3, and max X. So this is telling me the minimum, the maximum, Q1, Q2, and Q3. All right, which are the exact same values that we just calculated. And as you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values from min to max. That's why it's called the 5-number summary. And so for every single list and 5-number summary and for things we're going to do forward, you can use this to calculate, to check yourself. All right, so again, one more quick reminder. I'm going to exit out of here. All right, to begin this process, press the stat, press edit because I'm going to create a list. All right, you put your values in. If you want to delete a list, you would just go highlight the list. Don't press delete because it'll disappear completely. Press clear, and then scroll down, and then it's cleared out for you. All right. And so I got my list, my L4 list. And go back to stat, and now I'm going to scroll over to calculate to make sure number 1 is highlighted. I can either press the number 1 or press enter. I got to choose my list. All right, if I got to change it, second, and then find the blue L number down below. Scroll down when I've done that appropriately. Press enter. Now I have a bunch of different values, some of which we'll use later on. Scroll down to get my 5-number summary. All right, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense as to what you're doing and how you're going about doing this and able to find it on your calculator. All right, so let's go back to our notes. We'll do one practice together. So I want to make sure that that is clear. All right, so just as a highlight, all right, this is my 5-number summary. Okay, a couple other things. This value right here is what's known as my standard deviation, which we will get to what that means in another video, but just kind of pointing it out right now. Okay, and then the n equals is my number of data points. So if I put in 10 value data points, I should have the number 10 there. If I put in 52, I'd have 52 there. All right, so sometimes that could be helpful. All right, and then this is my mean up here, the x with the bar over top of it. All right, let's do this example pretty quick. Take a minute, pause the video, okay, go into your calculator and try and find these different values. Okay, then it says use your information to find if there is an outlier. All right, so I went ahead and did this already. So I got my min is 65. My Q1 is 81.5. Okay, my median is 86. My Q3 is 90. And my max, that's ugly, max is 95. Okay. So again, refer back to the previous 5 minutes or so to look through how to put that in your calculator, but this is the values that should come up if you put those data points in there. Okay. So it says, so this is my 5-number summary. This is my minimum, my lower quartile, median, upper, and maximum. But it says, all right, find your outliers. So again, the process there is I need to first start by finding my IQR. That is Q3 minus Q1. Okay, so I take Q3, which is 90, minus Q1, which is 81.5, and I get 8.5. So that's my IQR. Okay, but in order to find the outliers, to adjust the boundaries, okay, I need to take that value, 8.5, and multiply that by 1.5. Okay, and I get 12.75. Okay. So to find a lower boundary, I need to take my Q1 minus 12.75. Okay, so my Q1 is 81.5 minus 12.75. And I'm going to end up with 68.75. Okay, so now that's my new lower boundary. Okay, my upper boundary is going to be Q3 plus 12.75, right? I'm expanding it higher, so I need to add, right? I'm expanding it lower for the lower boundary. That's why I need to subtract. So I then take 90 and then add 12.75. That gives me 102.75. Okay, so my new boundaries are 68.75 to 102.5. So if anything is below 68.75, outlier. Anything above 102.75, outlier. Okay, so I can look back at my min and max and all my data points, and I see that, well, I do have 65, so I'd have a lower outlier of 65. And my max is 95, so nothing's above 102.5, so I'd have no upper outlier. Okay, so hopefully that makes more sense. You got another example down below. And if you want to check those answers, you can go back to the notes posted on OneNote to check to see if you're tracking, or just use it as a practice one getting ready for a quiz or test. All right, hopefully this stuff makes some sense. We're going to continue to build off of this in future videos. So we found out what the 5-number summary was, how to use our calculator to find that value. what the IQR was, and then how to use that to find different outliers. All right. Hopefully this has been helpful. Please feel free to rewatch this as many times as necessary. Come get help if you need it. All right. Thanks for watching, guys.